There's a lot of good scenes in this movie, but I'd say the one that comes to mind is when the main character, RJ McCready, has devised a test to identify what the thing is, and he
Hmm.
does it by tying up all of his colleagues to a couch and tests their blood one by one to see if it reacts adversely. And the one whose blood runs away from the hot wire is the thing.
That's
And
an
the slow build and anticipation of that as he goes from petri dish to petri dish was excellent. Love it.
ah! Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, podcasts, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and you are joining us at the tail end of our spring special, where we're talking about movies that are meaningful to us in our hearts. They're winners in our hearts, but probably were not winners in the box office or at critical reception. So joining me today to talk about a movie that we are actually, I think, both going to be very enthusiastic about is my good friend, Rich Mathias. Welcome back, Rich.
How you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing good. Now, I said this to you right before we started, but I do want to put it in the episode as well that one reason I knew I wanted to try and have you on is because talking to you about the variety of movies that you watch is what inspired this segment.
I mean, I'm so happy that you set up a time just for these kinds of movies, just because, I think a lot of movies in our hearts are just wonderful for different reasons or other. We have attachments to them, and a lot of us can appreciate a bad movie as well for being
Mm-hmm.
equally, if not more entertaining than a good one. So I'm glad you're
Yeah.
doing it. Although the movie that I've chosen is actually a good movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then this is also something that we kind of started saying before the show, but like what makes something a B movie is a lot more subjective than it would seem. It's kind of like a lot more basically about vibes. Like, how does it feel to you?
Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit like a lot of people will focus on the budget or is it an independent studio or not, or was it
Mm-hmm.
critically acclaimed or not. And I think those are all good, but also it's very much one of those things of you know it when you see it.
Yeah. But before we get into that, though, is there anything you would like to say to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I definitely love watching movies and TV shows, mostly because I like storytelling of any kind. So whether it's books, comics, or TV, film, or just somebody who has a good story to tell me, I'm very happy to find myself absorbed into those worlds. In terms of me personally, I've been on your podcast once before.
Yeah.
I've known you for a few years, so we're just friends, and I'm just happy to talk to you about something that I like.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to get into this one because this is a movie I know because of the remake. So, what movie have you brought for us to talk about today?
The movie that I chose is a 1982 science fiction horror movie called The Thing, directed by John Carpenter.
Horror legend John Carpenter. But I found out about this movie because I saw the remake. It is a remake, but it's also like a sequel. So if you've seen the newer one, the thing is that it follows the movie we're going to talk about today. But I think what it does is it's really interesting in the way that it plays off of what happens in this movie. So if you've seen both, you kind of get to see like a fuller timeline of what happens once this creature is released, I guess would be the best word for it. But also, is there anything that you think we should know about this movie before we get into it?
Yeah, I think I would want to clarify before anybody listening to this gets up in arms and runs to the comment section
Hmm.
talking about how The Thing is not a B movie. I
Yeah.
would agree that it's not really a B movie, but it has B movie elements in that it is in some ways a creature feature. It's very
Hmm.
isolating in its setting. It
Hmm.
was panned by critics at the time. It has I wouldn't say reliance, but certainly a huge amount of gore and blood and viscera that
Yeah.
add to the fear of the movie. And, little props to John Carpenter himself, who has directed several now classic B movies like
Right.
Halloween and They Live.
Hmm.
And so I think there's enough connections or B movie adjacents that this one can be kind of snuck into the back door.
Right. Well, and I mean, I guess this is also something we can get into later if we have time, but something that I love about horror is I think of horror as being like inherently like countercultural, in that like very few horror movies are ever going to make it to an awards ceremony. They're not necessarily made to do that. They're made to represent fears that people have in the modern day, and they often end up critiquing something. So kind of by that nature, they end up being countercultural often. And I think that that also kind of lends itself to naturally becoming, in one way or another, falling into one of these B category things, even when they are really good movies. But I saw some of the reviews you sent to me about this when you were discussing that, and they were savage.
Yeah, some phrases used were like barf bag of a movie, or like people thought it's an over excess of blood and gore, disgusting, made you feel
Hmm.
sick and nauseous. And I will say the practical effects are pretty impressive and a lot of blood and viscera, but I think that's actually a feature, not a bug.
I would agree. I pulled up one of them because it was funny. The words used were foolish and depressing, with actors used, quote, merely as props to be hacked, slashed, disemboweled, and decapitated, finally to be eaten and regurgitated, which is too phony to be disgusting, end quote.
Outrageous. Critic credentials need to be revoked.
So mean, but and also, in my opinion, so funny. Rich, could you please give us a summary of the 1982 movie, The Thing?
Sure. So even pre-credits in The Thing, you have your classic round disc of an alien spaceship flying towards Earth.
Hmm.
Again, there's a little B movie connection. And then it crashes into Earth, and then you see the title of The Thing. The entire movie takes place in Antarctic research stations.
Hmm.
And the main character, Kurt Russell, who plays a character named R.J. McCready, is part of an American Antarctic research group. They're just sitting, chilling, killing the time when a dog starts running towards their research station across an empty, icy field, being chased by a Norwegian helicopter
Hmm.
that is trying to gun down this dog. And in self defense, because some of those bullets stray into their own camp,
Yeah.
Russell and the team end up having to kill the Norwegian research people that are chasing the dog. The dog escapes into their research station. And Russell, being very, I guess, suspicious about what happened, takes his chopper to the Norwegian station himself, where he finds an enormous excavation site of the spaceship that is shown at the beginning of the movie.
Hmm.
And it also found some horribly maimed and disfigured Norwegian researchers, including one that has taken his own life in a horrific way.
Yeah.
And so he rushes back to the US station thinking, what on earth is it that was dug up out of the ice? And as they gets back, things start to go sideways. He
Hmm.
puts the dog into the kennel with the other huskies, and immediately the other huskies start whimpering as that dog transforms into a absolute
Monstrosity.
nightmarish creature with
Yeah.
tentacles and multiple heads, and starts attacking and eating the other dogs.
Hmm.
And then it escapes through some kind of pipe before everyone can kill it. They hear the dogs and they rush in and they see the monsters
Okay,
in
so
there right away. So
they
right
do
away,
see
the
it.
people are clued in on what they're seeing or what they're dealing with. Yes.
Oh, okay. And now they know that it's loose in the research station.
That's right. And so they have a doctor on site. They autopsy one of the other leftover dogs. And yeah, sorry. The doctor is able to conclude using some awesome graphics of like an old DOS computer of a slow
Yes.
moving, green circle absorbing another slow moving green circle. And then it
Very
turns
good.
red, indicating that it's been absorbed.
Yeah,
Classic
yeah.
graphics.
10 out of 10.
But then we're clued in on the fact that it can mimic perfectly any creature given enough time. And
Hmm.
from there, the movie shifts into an exercise of paranoia in a lockdown location.
Hmm.
It's Antarctica. They can't leave the station. Weather's a snowstorm coming in. If you go outside, you'll
Hmm.
freeze to death. So you have to be inside. And you have a creature who may or may not have consumed one or more of the members of your team. And you don't know which one's which.
Well, and that's also
So,
part of the problem, right?
yeah.
Because it consumes, it doesn't like leave a body around, it consumes the body. So you have to notice who is never in the same room together anymore once
Mhm.
this creature just kind of starts going.
And of course, they create reasons for characters to be away from one another. I
Yeah.
thought I saw this. Oh, I went to
Let's
check on
split up.
this.
Yeah.
They're never just staying in the same room together.
Why would
Exactly.
they?
They'll
No.
occasionally find a ripped piece of clothing, like the Hulk was there, and
Hmm.
that's their
Hmm.
only evidence that somebody ripped out of their clothing and is now a
The
thing.
thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so where does it go from here? So they're all trapped inside. The thing is in there, and it does start eating and imitating crew members.
From there, people get killed one by one.
Hmm.
The doctor at one point runs outside, sabotages both the helicopter and the other transportation
Hmm.
equipment. He has come to his conclusion on his own, running a computer simulation on the
Hmm.
previously mentioned
Very good
super old
graphics.
computer that he
Yeah.
uses. Yes, that in 27,000 hours after this thing reaches any human civilization would be when every single human being would be infected. And so the doctor has already decided on his own that nobody can leave the station alive. So
Hmm.
nobody can escape. Meanwhile, the rest of the team is trying to figure out who did what, devising tests to figure out who's the thing, who's
Hmm.
not, who should have a weapon, who should not, who should
Yeah.
be tied up, who shouldn't be, including the scene that I mentioned at the beginning. They heat up a wire to test people's blood, and if the blood runs away or tries
Hmm.
to escape, because they determine that each cell is somehow an independent organism when it
Insane.
comes to the thing.
Sort of like a man of war, I guess. The jellyfish, I mean, where it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
that each cell is an independent organism, but it's like one organism that is
Hmm.
made up of many teeny tiny organisms.
Oh, I had no idea that such an animal even existed.
Yeah,
Now I'm
maybe, you know what?
terrified.
Maybe that's not a very good metaphor if not a lot of people know that. But yes. So anyway, they're like, yeah, so the blood is actually not blood. It's many teeny tiny copycat creatures. It will run away, and it does so.
And the reason they found that out is to go backwards a little bit. When they tried to defibrillate a crew member who had fallen unconscious, as the man rubs the paddles to
Yeah.
defibrillate him a second time, this is very hard to describe, but
Yes.
his stomach opens up into an enormous maw. And
Oh,
then when the guy goes to defibrillate him, he bites the man's arms off from the shoulders.
uh-huh.
And so you have blood spraying both
Yeah.
from the man's arms, from his now torso, which is gouting blood,
Uh-huh.
and then also from the giant hole inside the man's stomach that has now teeth in it. And then that man's head
Yeah.
slowly rips off the body, grows tentacled legs, and tries to run out of the room.
Yeah.
So going back to earlier about reviews saying a barf bag of a movie that makes you feel sick, it's because of probably effects like this, which again, I personally think are strokes of genius.
So, to wrap this up, how does the movie end then? So these people are being picked off one by one. They're being terrorized by the thing. They devise like at least one or two kind of methods they can accurately test for it, but that doesn't necessarily stop it from eating them one by one.
Crew gets whittled down to eventually two, the main character, McCready, and another man named Childs, played by the great B movie favorite Keith David.
Hmm.
And these two are just kind of left staring at each other in a flaming Antarctic research station that they have basically blown up several times over.
Yeah.
And they just share a drink together, staring at each other, knowing that they're going to die. And it ends with the line, well, how about we just wait here a while and we'll see what happens? And
Hmm.
there's left a little bit of uncertainty of whether or not one or the other or both might be the thing. But then the movie
Oh.
ends there.
Oh, okay. I thought I knew more about this movie than I did, but now I'm wondering, is the sequel that I was talking about, maybe it's a prequel. And now actually that I'm saying it out loud, the remake is a prequel. I got these events mixed up.
Well, I haven't seen the newer make of this movie, so you've actually made me more interested in seeing it. I'll have to watch it perhaps after the podcast.
Hmm. I hope you do. I would recommend watching both of them because I really liked the remake, even though they definitely did use a lot more CGI. But what a good ending.
Yeah, it's just terrific.
What a thinker.
Yeah.
So, okay, we like this movie, but what do you think was behind its failure, or what did it get wrong when it was released?
I think you touched on it earlier when you talked about how horror is never something that's in consideration for, awards or anything prestige related.
Hmm.
In general, I think the further you go back, probably critically, horror films were just considered low rent, not a thinking film, not
Hmm.
of anything esteemed, and so probably there's that bias. There is a huge amount of gore and violence and viscera. Some pretty visceral stuff happens in that movie, again, including decapitations and a lot of body horror. I think that's probably has a lot to do with it. Another thing that's funny that happened was, can you guess what other movie related to aliens came out that same year?
Was it Alien?
No, it was E.T.
Oh,
So if you can imagine,
I had to lean away from the
uh,
microphone. Okay.
yeah. So if you think about that, like 2 weeks before the thing comes out, E.T. comes out. So you have perhaps the most lovable alien in film of all time, and he brings broken families together with the power of love. And then
Hmm.
2 weeks later, you have the most depressing, awful, dark, bleak
Yeah.
story of people being torn apart by another alien. And I have to think people were kind of in the halo effect of ET a little bit when they saw the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's possible.
Even though I first guessed Alien, the thing is definitely much more of like a psychological kind of thriller. Even though it is both a creature feature and a psychological movie that like gets towards like you don't know who to trust. It's like what inspired games like Among Us and other things like that, if that's a familiar touchstone for listeners out there.
Yeah, paranoia based any horror is just a good trope. As you said, not knowing who to trust, not knowing who's next, who can you go into a room with together. We
Yeah.
see this in horror movies a lot, and they just execute it perfectly here.
So then, like, we've kind of already started talking about this. So what do you think it got right? Like, to that end, it has, I think, become a cult classic. Like, it's now well beloved. Maybe that's kind of also something about horror movies is it takes some time for them to like get traction. But what's your opinion on that? What do you think it did very well?
Oh, it's just great, tense music, great actors, very well acted, and the setting does a lot of the heavy lifting. Isolation in a cold place where it doesn't need to be explained why you can't leave because a lot of places, for example, at Halloween, there's so many ways to escape. Just go to the next block over, get out of
Mm-hmm.
there. You just can't go anywhere in an Antarctic station. So the setting kind of takes care of the isolation part.
Mm.
And I can't say enough about the practical effects. It's mentioned before, it's mentioned again. They sunk 10% of the budget into the effects. And,
Wow.
this movie's 1982. This is
Mm-hmm.
2025 now. This movie's over 40 years old. And to say that practical effects stand the test of time for that period of time is saying something. But if you were to pop it in, you would watch it, you would be amazed at how high quality it is.
Mm-hmm.
When these characters die or transform, it's the opposite of what it feels like these days to see a CGI green screen. Like this one feels like it's in the shot with the actors. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is also kind of like bearing out. I think it's something people are kind of returning back to because, like, to use a couple of other touchstones, I know that that's one reason why to this day a lot of people really like Jurassic Park because the practical effects feel more real and a little bit less aged than when we look at like the computer graphics that were available at that time. And to do another touchstone, that was one reason why people loved the much more recent movie, The Substance, because that movie also took advantage of like very visceral practical effects to kind of get across the body horror. And what you said, that makes it feel like it's really just there in the room because it's something people can interact with. You don't have to fake that level of interaction.
The Substance's practical effects are awesome too. It's really good. But yeah, that's definitely a good hallmark. There are some directors today, that are still carrying on the tradition of let's try not to green screen it as much, like a
Mm-hmm.
Guillermo del Toro with really solid makeup design and
Mm-hmm.
practical effects. I love that.
So then, if you were to give the thing a one phrase subtitle, what would you give it?
So I'll tell you one of the taglines of this movie. I don't think I can top it, which
Mm.
is "Man is the warmest place to hide," which is just too
Oh,
good.
oh, oh my God.
So I think I just have to give credit to the one they came up with at the time because when I read that, I started laughing. I was like, "That is perfect."
That's disgusting. Although Star Wars took notes from.
That's true. It's absolutely right.
Oh my God.
And in
Okay.
fact, the Substance did take notes as well.
Oh no. Oh, okay. Well, then now that's a hint for
Yeah.
me. How awful. But then the way that we're wrapping up this one is to ask you, Rich, if you could rate the thing on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, 1 is very bad, 5 is very good, what rating would you give it?
Probably something like 4 or 4.5 out of 5. The critics that said that the actors are a little bit 2D and wooden, I can agree with that. There's not much
Hmm.
to the character depth, but they play second fiddle to the creature and
Yeah.
the effects and the fear of it all. So I think it's a terrific movie, and the fact that it stands the test of time over 40 years later speaks to
Hmm.
how great it is. I think it's a masterpiece of a movie, actually,
A 4.5 masterpiece of a movie.
slash B movie.
Okay, okay. No, to be honest, I'm not really even here to argue with you. I also love it. But we are out of time, though. So, Rich, thank you so much
All
for
right.
coming on my show. I loved
Thanks for
talking
having
about
me.
this. This was so good. And I'm glad you were able to come on and kind of like help close the loop on this topic that you inspired.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all you listeners out there, this has been Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. I was your host, Amanda Stevens, with my guest, Rich Mathias. And we were discussing John Carpenter's 1982 The Thing. Man is the warmest place to hide. If not a tale of our time originally, perhaps a tale of our time now. And we'll see you next time.